Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Planet Football. We're here to break down all the biggest and most important stories happening in the football world. Today we'll be speaking with legendary goalkeeper and Ajax CEO Edwin van der Sar, as well as Yahoo Sports' Doug McIntyre. I'm Grant Wahl, and sitting across from me is the man, the myth, the legend, Luis Miguel Echegaray. Ready to get this thing going?
90 episodes.
Yeah, 90, I like it.
And we don't look a day older.
Let's start with the Mexican men's national team, which faces Bermuda and Panama this week in the CONCACAF Nations League. What do you think is the top story to watch this week with El Tri?
There's a few, I think. Tata Martino is going to use the Nations League to obviously experiment with younger players, bring them in. But this is also the opportunity for Tecatito Corona, Hector Herrera, Chucky Lozano, players who couldn't play at the Gold Cup for different reasons, to come in and, practice their way and show their way to Tata for Mexico. I think the other side that I'm looking at as well is because Raúl Jiménez is not in there, Chicharito is not in there. I'm looking at JJ Macías, Jose Juan Macías, who scored against Trinidad and Tobago earlier this month in that sort of younger squad friendly. And he's a super, interesting, talented player that's a striker. So we can see the future of that. And the other one, of course, is Jonathan Gonzalez. He's in the squad. Let's see if he gets his minutes. But I think there are two things here. Obviously, Mexico didn't have a great time against Argentina. This Nations League, the first game is against Bermuda. With all due respect to Bermuda, it's not necessarily the toughest opponent when it comes to really testing your mettle, but it's a great opportunity for younger Mexican players to prove to Tata, because Tata Martino has always been about, yes, let's develop the young talent both domestically and also encourage those young stars in Europe to also develop. So it'll be a good chance to see the young guys.
Also, too, I would point out, in the big picture here, Nations League is Nations League, but these are still competitive matches that affect FIFA rankings.
Right.
And if you're Panama, which is playing Mexico this week, you need to get some points and get some results, because Panama is going to be right on the edge of whether they can actually qualify for the Hex in World Cup qualifying, and that's what really matters. And right now, they're on the outside looking in.
Yeah, and let's remember also, Tata Martino is not the kind of manager that's just like, oh, this is just a nation. No, he's going all out. Meanwhile, the United States men's national team has the first two of its 4 CONCACAF Nations League group matches in the next week against Cuba and Canada. Former U.S. coach Jurgen Klinsmann told ESPN's Herb Gomez, a friend of the show, that Nation League games are, quote, a waste of time for teams like the U.S. and Mexico, and said that the U.S. would be much better off playing friendlies against top teams from Europe and South America instead. Grant, what do you think of all this?
I mean, do I think that these are a waste of time? Yeah, for the most part they are for teams like Mexico and the U.S. That said, the whole reason that CONCACAF is doing its Nations League is because Europe started a Nations League, and so their European teams aren't available to play friendlies much at all anymore. And so there's literally just not that option. South American teams are going to be really occupied with their long World Cup qualifying campaign before long, and so it won't be long before South American teams aren't available for friendlies. So I don't think Jurgen necessarily gets the whole picture about why Nations League exists. And I would also say these are 4 group stage games for the U.S. in these 2 windows. And the Canada game should at least be competitive in a way that I don't, or the 2 Canada games as opposed to the 2 Cuba games. So yeah, not great, but this gets at my whole idea of what international soccer is right now, and I think we need to find some ways to improve it. And Nations League I think it works better in Europe when you have more good teams than it does in a region like CONCACAF where there aren't that many good teams.
Yeah, I mean, my criticism is more about the overburden of matches altogether. I mean, CONCACAF is not just the exclusive region where we have this problem. I agree. I think the U.S. and Mexico, obviously, there could be better, more, tougher matches when it comes to friendlies. But like you said, the availability around the world is not that much. But I will say to Jurgen, okay, and not necessarily just him, but anybody that thinks, it's a waste of time, which I agree on the overburden of things. But on the other hand, the U.S. men's national team did not qualify for the World Cup last year. It ended 5th in CONCACAF's final standings, right? Only Trinidad and Tobago had worse losses than the U.S. So there's no room for arrogance right now, and I think that Greg Berhalter knows that, and it's about keep playing away with the team that you have, keep developing. The more this team is together and creates that identity, the better for them. Yeah, sure, could there be tougher opponents? Of course, but beggars cannot be choosers.
Manchester United is a mess, sitting in 12th place in the Premier League, just 2 points above the relegation zone, with a game against Liverpool looming right after the international break. If you were Ole Gunnar Solskjaer right now, what exactly would you be doing during this international window?
This is a good question, because every question so far has been about the director of football, and we need to, okay, that's fine, and that's true, but this is a long-term thinking. What is Ole Gunnar Solskjaer going to do right now to figure this out? So there's a few things I think. First of all, I was looking at the record overall from the beginning of the season. Manchester United has conceded 8 goals. It's not that many. It's only lost 2 matches where it's been more than 1 goal. So defensively, they're okay. They're not great, but that's not where the Achilles heel is. The issue is offensive creativity. That's where the issue is. Are you creating enough chances? Because they're getting possession. The game against Newcastle United was 69% possession. They had their chances, so that's fine. But in terms of lethal offensive creativity that's specifically a direct shot on target and how many goals are being scored, that's the problem. Obviously, Lukaku and Alexis Sanchez leaving, injuries, it's all an issue. But I also look at the formation. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is playing Marcus Rashford up front by himself with this trio behind him, and then Scott McTominay and then Fred as this supportive defensive midfielders. I think go back to basics. Let's go with a 4-4-2 and just put Rashford next to Mason Greenwood. Okay, he's young. Put him in there. Let's see what he can do. And just go back to the basics and just get as many shots on target as you can, because that's the issue. It's not defensively. I mean, yes, obviously they're not perfect, but that's not the number one area. So if I was Ole Gunnar Solskjaer in this international break, I would do everything in my power to just tweak the formation and prepare Mason Greenwood to start. Just go 2 up front. Marcus Rashford can't do this by himself.
I also wondered, too, Anthony Martial, how close he is to being able to come back. And, Mason Greenwood's really young. To, put too much pressure on him, I would be concerned. But I think he does need opportunities. And they just got to score goals.
Yep.
It's just not happening right now.
So they need to support that lone striker, because that's not working. The Chicago Fire announced this week that the team would move back to Soldier Field next season, and that Bastian Schweinsteiger is retiring. Grant, you spoke to new Fire owner Joe Mansueto last week for the Planet Football podcast. What do you see happening with the Fire, and do you think that this team will change its name by the end of it all?
Well, Mansueto said directly that he likes the Chicago Fire name.
Okay.
It's kind of crazy. If you Google Chicago Fire, the soccer team is not what comes up first. So I kind of get why some people are wondering if they should maybe think about rebranding, moving back to a new stadium or to their old stadium, in the same way that Sporting Kansas City did its rebrand when it moved into a new stadium. But he clearly likes Chicago Fire. I don't see that changing. In terms of the team itself, with Schweinsteiger retiring, you got a DP slot opening up, and Mansueto was very clear in saying to me that he wants to spend money. He thinks that MLS as a league should loosen the shackles on owners spending money, which is great to hear, actually, and he's part of this new breed of owners that really seems to push for that. That said, spending money hasn't necessarily been the Fire's problem over the last few years. They've had the 3rd highest payroll in the league, but they just aren't good enough on the field. And so I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on Paunovic, the coach, on Nelson Rodriguez, the boss there, on the soccer side, to get things right. My sense is that those guys are going to get another year in 2020. Mansueto said on the podcast that he has a lot of respect for those guys. Didn't sound like someone who was about to make a change, but I don't think they should have a very long leash. This is a club that's missed the playoffs 3 out of the last 4 years under these guys, and this season was, disappointing once again.
A return to Soldier Field is a good thing. I like the fact that, the accessibility, the fan engagement, all those things are going to help. I mean, look at Atlanta United, look at LAFC. There is such a value in MLS when you have that home support and that fan engagement and just people being able to really easily get to that stadium and really calling it a home. So that's going to be a factor for sure.
On Thursday, Iran allowed around 3,500 women to attend a World Cup qualifier in Tehran against Cambodia. Previously, Iran had not allowed women in stadiums, and Amnesty International said, quote, Iran's decision to allow a token number of women into the stadium is a cynical publicity stunt, end quote, and not a full change that will allow women to attend games year-round. What are your thoughts on all this?
I think that first of all, it's a great day to see women finally attend stadiums in Iran to watch the Iranian national team. But I think that quote is true. I don't think that FIFA should much pat itself on the back. Specifically, it's been mainly because of the resistance and the power behind, so many women, Iranian women, pushing for this. I mean, of course, we think of Sahar Kodayari, Blue Girl. There were chants singing, her name in the game itself. There's been so much people power and resistance to make this happen, but there's still a lot of things to be done. Like, for example, there's the cap imposition, charging a certain percentage to women as opposed to men, limiting the number of women that can enter the stadium. So we're talking about a basic right of a woman allowed to enter a stadium, a basic right. So we shouldn't necessarily be patting or congratulating FIFA so much on the fact that this is a basic right that should just be free. An Iranian woman should be free to watch a men's game, a women's game, whatever, anytime they want. And it's not exclusive to soccer, right?
True, and this game is a start, in my opinion, but it can't be just this, because it needs to be as many women allowed into stadiums as want to come in and can get tickets. There's even reports now coming out that for people who held up Blue Girl signs, that they were removed, these women, from the stadium today and arrested in some cases. So I think FIFA needs to keep the pressure on and really still threaten to remove Iran from World Cup qualifying if Iran doesn't get very quickly now to a point where it's just totally free for as many women as who want to come into the stadium.
Like you said, it's the first step of 1,000.
Joining us now in studio is Edwin van der Sar, the legendary Dutch goalkeeper who is now the CEO of Ajax. Edwin, thanks for coming on the show.
You're welcome. Great to be here.
Really great to have you in studio. I want to start by asking about Ajax's new strategy for trying to raise your profile in the United States. What are you doing in the US as a club, and why is it important to you?
Yeah, I think that whatever the DNA of our club has always been development of players. Yeah, bringing players from the academy into the first team. I think in the 70s you had Johan Cruyff, in the 80s Mark van Basten, Frank Rijkaard, 95 now whatever Matthijs de Ligt, Frenkie de Jong. But at a certain point, I don't think that's enough anymore. I think we want to tell the story also to a wider audience, and I think whatever soccer is getting traction. I think also in the States. I know that whatever the big clubs, from the big leagues, the big countries, are taking these kind of steps, and I think we should follow them also a little bit.
In world football, it's kind of rare for a famous former player to become the CEO of a big club. What was your path to becoming the CEO of Ajax, and what do you do for the club as the CEO?
Yeah, I got a question from Johan Cruyff, and the last 2 months before my career ended in 2011, he said we want to evolve Ajax and make sure that we get real football players into the board of directors, and eventually we want also the CEO, so the head of the directors team, to be a football player. Are you interested? So okay, so that's a question. So I did a master in sports management. I got appointed as a marketing director at first. That time CEO had 2 jobs: lead the club and also develop myself as to become his successor. And I think that's the way that Ajax works. So giving young talent a chance, develop yourself, and you get a chance in the first team. And yeah, I developed myself first as a player, and now as a director, and whatever, now being the chief executive.
And here you are.
I know.
We all remember last season Ajax had a magical run to the UEFA Champions League semifinals. Then you sold Frenkie de Jong and Matthijs de Ligt. What has your strategy been to try and make up for those major losses and still compete in this season's Champions League and try to win the Dutch league?
Yeah, I think whatever Ajax has always been that players are taking the next step. We are not a finishing station. We're a developing club, and of course we need to perform at the highest level. And over the last 10 to 20 years, we've not been too often at that level. I think the last 3 years we really hit heights with quality players coming from the academy or even scouting from foreign countries. So in that way, replacing Matthijs and Frankie is not easy, but we've dealt with that before. We have that experience, and of course they're extreme talents. You don't go to Barcelona straight away and you walk into the first team. Matthijs going to Juventus and being whatever in the center of defense at 19. I was 28 when I went to Juventus. I had a difficult time already. So
these kids have it all.
These kids, I know, the young guys, they have the whole future ahead of them. No, it's fantastic how they develop and how they take the next steps. And for us, we have to deal with it. And I think that's the purpose of the club also, to develop and bring in new players.
Well, one of those players, a young player you have, is an 18-year-old Dutch-American fullback, Sergiño Dest, who is very promising. He's still deciding whether to play for the Netherlands or the USA. How would you describe Sergiño as a player, and how has he developed at Ajax since the age of 12? And in which country do you think he'll choose?
That's the money. That's the million-dollar question. The money question. No, I think he was an attacker on left and right side, and he came for the last year, played in the second team, did really well. And this summer there was Copa America, there was Africa Cup, so we had some players injured. He was taken with the first team to the training camp in Austria, and he did extremely well. Got first on the left side of the defense, then he got a chance at the right side of the defense. He could not see that this was his first matches in the first team. So from the start, he left a great impression, and that's how it goes at Ajax. If you're good enough, you're playing. It doesn't matter your age or your experience. So the coaches don't have any hesitation to throw him, into the Champions League matches. The way he has pace, he has skills, determination. And that makes him a great player, especially that's the position on the right-hand side in the system that we play, to come up and work in a tandem with Hakim Ziyech.
Do you have any idea which way he's leaning?
Nah, I think for the States, the advantage they picked up his talent before. At 16, 17, he got invitations to play for the national team in the US, because he played in the first team. The Dutch team is knocking on his door. I think for him it was important to take a step back now, to have a little rest, because he played so many games and the attention, everything. So hopefully he makes the right decision. I spoke last week with him after the Valencia match. I think he's still undecided, but from a, could I say, commercial perspective, as a marketing director, when I started to unlock markets, you need players. America would be the destination for him. My football director, Mark Overmars, he would rather that he choose for Holland, less travel time, that kind of thing. So, but it's all to him, and I think he has wise people around him, good agent and a family. So in that way, hopefully for you guys, you will see him more often, and for us, it doesn't really matter. It's what Sergiño wants.
Another young player in your squad is Edson Alvarez.
Yes.
A really interesting purchase, a versatile 21-year-old center back and defensive midfielder. I talked to him a few weeks ago about his pride on being the first Mexican to play for the club. Is Mexico still a major focal point for Ajax, Latin America in itself, when you look at players? How do you see that?
Yeah, I think we changed it. I think 4 or 5 years ago, we had a lot of players from Scandinavia, Denmark, almost same language, same background. But at a certain point, we need also something different. So we changed our scouting network a little bit also to South America, Colombia, Argentina with David Neres, Argentina with Talifico, and
Brazil with David
Martinez.
Neres, but Argentina,
so in that way, Mexico was the next step, and we were looking for a replacement for Matthijs de Ligt. Initially, he played a lot in defense, and later on, when he was already on the radar for us, he started to play in the midfield. And for us now, most of his games he played at midfield, and he had a big impression. He scored in the qualification match for the Champions League and in the first match in the group stage. So for us, it's a tremendous acquisition and player, and he can develop a lot of his qualities in our team.
Yeah, he's a great player, and all the best to him for sure. Edwin, you can't be here without us talking to you about your incredible past. You spent a significant amount of time at Manchester United from 2005, 2011. I personally saw you play so many times. You became an iconic keeper for the team. Sir Alex Ferguson actually said that since Peter Schmeichel, you are the greatest keeper that's ever played for the team. What are your memories from your time at Manchester United, and what are your thoughts on the current situation that's going on right now?
Yeah, I had an incredible time. I was 34 when I went to Man United, and I was hoping to get two years, win 1 Premier League. Eventually it became 6 years, 4 titles, 3 Champions League finals. So in that way, I finished my career on a high, and I credit also Ferguson and all the players we had. We had an amazing team with Ferdinand, ROONEY, Carrick, Giggs, Scholes, Neville. You call them Vidic. So in that way, it was a complete different structure and team that's playing at the moment. The last 6 or 7 years, we have not been moving forward. It's been sideways or backwards, and yeah, that's a big problem for United at the moment, and also the position they have at the moment. It's sad to see, of course, the position they have and the struggle they are in.
We have to ask this because we have this audience that does want to know.
I think it's a contract that we signed that I came here that we not know. What's the last question? What's the question?
But I'll tell you what, Edwin. I think it's a good thing to put it to rest, okay. Right? To put it to rest, because there are rumors that they are looking for a director of football. You obviously have a past relationship with the club. Why don't you put it to rest? What do you say? Would you ever be interested in a return to Manchester United? Yeah,
I think I got. Besides the family, my wife and the kids and everything, and friends, I've 2 loves in my life. That's Ajax. They gave me the opportunity to develop, to scout at me. They gave me the chance to shine in the world of football. Another steps, last club of my career, gave me also a lot of attention and recognition, and everything, and developed even at a later stage. So yeah, of course I'm interested in a position. But I think I need to learn a little bit more myself here at Ajax, develop myself even further, and of course eventually let's see what the future brings. But United, it's a fantastic club. There's a great following all over the world, and everybody wants to play for them, or I think eventually also want to work for them.
See, and now we've asked it. But that's it.
That's true, but I have a different position. I'm here. I'm the chief executive here, and director of football is somehow. Not connected, of course. I know a little bit about football, of course.
Right. What they're looking for is a little bit different as well. Okay. That's right, yeah.
Well, Edwin van der Sar, is an absolute honor to have you on our show. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, guys.
For this week's social media check-in, we had no choice but to discuss the insane drama happening on Twitter between Coleen Rooney and Rebekah Vardy, wives of soccer stars Wayne Rooney and Jamie Vardy. Grant, this is the story of the week. Everybody's just been talking about it. It's kind of incredible. Why don't you just set the scene for our viewers?
It's kind of a crazy story here because Coleen Rooney and Wayne Rooney, obviously very famous in England. Newspapers like to print stuff about their private lives. And so Coleen Rooney ends up posting this on Twitter, saying that she was wondering over a 5-month period, why were so many private things that she was putting out there on Instagram, on her private Instagram, ending up in the Sun newspaper, the tabloid.
In a group chat that she was doing.
Yeah, and so what she ended up doing was she did an experiment where she blocked all of her Instagram followers' ability to see her posts on her Insta stories, except for one. And she continued to post things that were semi-salacious, or at least that the Sun might want, but actually weren't true, and wanted to see if they ended up, those untrue things, appearing in the Sun, which they did. And so that one person she then knew was the person who was leaking this stuff to the Sun. And she has this long Twitter post, and at the end she writes, "It's ... Rebekah Vardy's account."
There are 2 things I want to say. Well, 3 actually. 1, Coleen Rooney should work for the FBI.
keep the Rooneys in DC, maybe.
Coleen is obviously, she misses home, so she's just doing a few things. But no, that's one. Number 2, I think that HBO needs to straight away do a show about this, an 8-episode series. Amy Adams can be Coleen Rooney. Jessica Chastain can be Rebekah VARDY. It will just blow off, okay? 3, I grew up in England, and this tabloid industry is just insanity. Insanity where, you know, the Sun newspaper or other newspapers pay like 35,000 to 40,000 pounds an article, and it's just incredible. But just like you said, it's just, you know, the way that this unfolded throughout the week has just been absolutely insane.
Yeah, and also, too, it's actually gotten sort of a mainstream following in the U.S. from people who don't necessarily follow soccer that closely. Yeah. And I would also add here, Rebekah VARDY posted that she denied this, for what that's worth.
She's hiring an IT expert.
A forensic investigator to look at her Instagram. I would say this, that I think it's pretty darn likely that she's the one who is doing this. But this is also a tabloid culture in the UK that you've had tabloids actually tap the cell phones of the royals, of famous soccer players, of lots of people. Piers Morgan's old outlet did this, and he got caught.
Absolutely. Like I said, I mean, I grew up there, and it's part of the culture there, and it's just like you said. It's not just the football world. It's pretty much every celebrity or every name that's prominent throughout the nation. And I just want to add this: as much fun as we're having talking about this, there are families behind both these people involved, and I just want to make sure that we think about that, because both, there's kids involved in this situation. I heard that one of Rebekah VARDY's friends went on a morning show saying how she's had to take her kids out of school. So all those things are really, not great for the situation. But, we got to go back to the source, which is Coleen ROONEY. She's the one that posted this on Twitter to unfold it publicly. So, that's what we have to talk about.
Joining us now is Doug McIntyre, who covers soccer for Yahoo Sports. Doug, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
The U.S. men's national team is together this week with Nations League games coming against Cuba and at Canada. Cuba shouldn't provide much resistance, but how much do you think Canada will?
I think Canada's going to provide a ton of resistance, actually, Grant. This is a big, big game for the Canadians. Canada hasn't been involved in the final round of World Cup qualifying in CONCACAF since way back in 1997. And because of a change in format, if they can manage to move up the FIFA rankings and be one of the top 6 teams in CONCACAF ahead of the final round of qualifying, they'll automatically get in. So there's a ton of stake for Canada if they can beat the United States, a team that's been better than them by a long shot traditionally, at least over the last 30 years or so. It would be a huge victory for them and a way to get into that last 6. So they're treating it like a final. I'm not sure the United States feels the same way about it. And to me, that gives the Canadians a bit of advantage. They're playing at home, and they have a good team. They have a really good group of attacking players, young players. We know Alphonso Davies from his time in MLS, the teenager that went over to Bayern Munich last year on a big transfer. So they're gonna be a formidable foe, I think, next Tuesday in Toronto.
Doug, you cover the team better than most. You know the inside and out of this squad. What are you looking for from this U.S. squad and Greg Berhalter during this Nations League?
I think they need a feel-good vibe, Luis. We saw last month in September, the United States lost to their biggest rival, 3-0 to Mexico at home in New Jersey. That loss came on the heels of another loss to Mexico in the Gold Cup final. And the American squad redeemed themselves a bit against a Uruguay team that's ranked 5th in the world, but didn't have Luis Suarez, didn't have Edison Cavani in that match. They were also shorthanded as well, the Americans, but managed to pull out a 1-1 draw. But this team needs to win to capture the fan base that is still pretty skeptical and a little bit cynical, frankly, about the American squad. It's 2 years to the day we're talking today after the United States failed to qualify for Russia 2018, the first World Cup the United States had missed since 1986. So I think we're going to see a big win against Cuba. But for fans to start to believe that this team can actually get back to the World Cup, make some noise in qualifying, I think fans are going to want to see a result on the road in Canada. And like I said before, it's going to be difficult to come by.
Doug, the Dutch-American Sergiño Dest is still making his decision on whether to play for the U.S. or the Netherlands. If you had to choose right now, which direction do you think he'll go?
It's really tough, Grant. And we're trying to read the tea leaves. I think everybody is. We've been reading interviews that Dest has done in Dutch. We've heard Ronald Koeman, the Netherlands manager, come out and say that he thinks this is a player that has a future with the Netherlands senior side, and has communicated that to Dest. And Dest is a kid that is 18 years old. He grew up by his own admission dreaming of playing for Ajax, which he's now doing. He's broken into the first team this year, has been a starter in Champions League matches for the biggest team in that country. And he wanted to play for the Netherlands internationally growing up, but he was overlooked by them also. And I think that's an important thing to remember. As a young player, he was overlooked, and he wasn't overlooked by the United States that called him in. He's been on a number of youth national teams that have played in World Cups for the United States. So he's represented the U.S. on some pretty big stages, started for the U.S. in that 3-0 loss against Mexico last month in New Jersey. And it's hard to know which way he'll go. I wouldn't want to handicap it, but I think if you press me, I would say that for a Dutch kid who grew up in the Amsterdam area, playing for the Dutch national team was his dream. And I would have to think that that's going to be a pretty tough call to turn down, although he has so far. He says he hasn't made his decision yet, and I think we need to believe him at this point.
Doug, with Jozy Altidore out due to injury, there are more minutes, 4 more forwards in this team, in this window. Which striker should take this window right now and really just grab this opportunity?
It's a great question, and it's an easy one to answer. Josh Sargent is the guy. We've seen him, the 19-year-old striker playing for Werder Bremen in Germany. He's broken into the starting lineup with that team. He's been in the 11 for Bremen the last 3 games in the Bundesliga. And just about an hour ago, U.S. coach Greg Berhalter at his pregame press conference said that Sargent will start tomorrow against Cuba. So it's an opportunity for him to get another goal at senior level. He already has 2, both those goals coming before he even was a first-team starter in Germany. So he comes into camp with a lot of confidence, scored a very good goal a few weeks back, and he's a guy that I think for sure, with Altidore out, he has an opportunity to lock down that striker position. Berhalter has said in the past that he sees Sargent as the top striker for the United States for many years to come. And I think this window, he has a chance to really cement himself in that spot.
Doug, you spoke to Greg Berhalter for a story this week about his comment on SiriusXM that the senior men's national team is not about developing players. What did he say to you, and do you buy what he said?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, Grant. And I think every national team coach around the world says the same thing. They don't have the players often enough to be able to develop them, to be able to make them better. And what Berhalter said was a version of that, what he said on the radio. But the comments seem to contradict, at least a little bit, the comments he made after that Mexico game, where he had his team play a system that they're still learning, and some players struggled. And afterwards, he was asked why he stuck with it, and he said because he wants to develop players. So his answer was basically, I can't turn a guy that's not a national team caliber player, a young player perhaps that is full of talent, has a lot of promise, but hasn't earned the opportunity yet, is not a first-team player for his club. He's not going to put them on the field in a national team game hoping to raise their level. But what he can do is when players are established, he gave the example of Weston McKennie, who's an established player at 20 years old in the Bundesliga with Schalke, has played in the Champions League. He thinks he can make players like that, and I would include Christian Pulisic in this group as well. He thinks he can make them better during the time with the national team. And I can understand his point. Playing international soccer exposes players to different styles, different coaches, different environments, all things that do make players better. Every player is a sum of his experiences. But certainly a lot of people's eyebrows were raised when he made those comments. But like a lot of things, I think the nuance is important. So I understand what he's saying, but I still wonder if there's enough time to get these guys to play the way he wants to play in his system, which is a complicated system. He pushed back on that idea a little bit. He says, I think that it's made too much of the fact that the system it takes a while to learn. He doesn't think it's that complex, but time will tell.
Doug, I'd really love your take. You mentioned Christian Pulisic. Let's talk about him and his current situation at Chelsea. Some US fans would naturally like to see him get more minutes. Others believe the answer is right there in the depth of players in that position, and really it's about patience for him. What do you make of all of it?
Yeah, I think when the transfer was announced in January, I think all of us wondered if Chelsea was the best destination for Christian Pulisic, just because they're a club that has the ability to buy players now. There's a transfer ban, so we won't get into that too much. But if you look at the players that they already have, they've got a lot of competition, particularly in the attacking midfield spots on the wings, the spot that Pulisic plays in. And really, they have too many good players for too few spots. And that's just the way it goes. When you're talking about the very best clubs in the world, and Chelsea's certainly one of those. So I think for Pulisic, I do think that he's going to be okay there eventually. It's still early days yet. It's only a few games into the Premier League season. He's had some nice moments, but it's been interesting to watch his progression, because what I think you've seen the last two times we've seen Pulisic play, we saw him play against a fourth-tier opponent in the league, the English League Cup. He started that match. The last half hour of that match, he played like his hair was on fire, as if he knew that this is what it's going to take every time he's on the field to get into the first team. He has to be involved. He has to be noticeable. He got a few shots off, didn't get a goal, but when he came in over the weekend in Chelsea's most recent game in the Premier League, came in and in a few minutes produced a really, really good assist. And that's what it's going to take. He's an attacking player. He was purchased for $73 million. And what he's going to be asked of at Chelsea is end product. Goals and assists. And as well as Pulisic played, I think he was all right in his earlier appearances. He started 4 games in a row back in August, but there wasn't a lot of end product there. And that's what's going to be asked of him. And I think he knows that. And I think the more opportunities he gets, we're going to start to see him getting more comfortable and contributing goals and assists for Chelsea.
Well, Doug McIntyre, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, gentlemen. Anytime.
And now for our parting shots. We're in the middle of a FIFA International Window for the men's game, and I've got to be honest, more and more, I don't like it. And I think that's due to a few things. Part of it is the growth of soccer in America, as the daily club game has gained popularity every year and is more easily seen on US television. Part of it is the decline in importance of the international game, as the UEFA Champions League and not the World Cup has become the true measuring stick of a player's career in the men's game. And part of it is the international calendar itself. As it currently stands, taking 2-week breaks in September, October, and November halts the momentum of the club game in leagues around the world and replaces it with national team friendlies and things like the Nations League that, if we're being honest, are kind of hard to get excited about. If it were up to me, I would prefer having club seasons go straight through the year without any international windows to break them up, and then have a 6 to 8 week international window all at once, where players don't have to fly back and forth from Europe across the ocean to North and South America every 10 days. This discussion is of a piece with how people in the US are seeing Jesse Marsch as he breaks through in Europe as an American coach with Red Bull Salzburg in the UEFA Champions League. Some fans are saying that Marsch should be the US men's national team coach. But if you ask me, Marsch is just fine in Europe, where coaching in the club game is given far more respect by the coaches themselves than coaching a national team these days. In a mature soccer culture, Jesse Marsch probably shouldn't become the US coach for a long time. As long as he's climbing the ranks at European clubs, he's in exactly the place he should be.
You know, it's funny, I was talking to you before taping how this was going to be my parting shot too. Not so much about Jesse Marsch, though he is a good example for it, but just the overwhelming burden of the international break and the fact that there are just too many fixtures. And I believe that also we're in a situation where quantity is damaging quality. So you said it, the travel back and forth for players, whether it's Europe or South America or the Americas or wherever. We have, I was watching a little bit of Brazil, Senegal, and Singapore. Like, think about just all that traveling back and forth. Somebody like Sadio Mane, who then has to go back to Liverpool and help his team try and win the Premier League title, et cetera, et cetera. So that to me is a major issue. The other one is the fact that there is an argument to be made that there are smaller countries that do benefit from situations like this, like when Bermuda hosts Mexico, I'm sure a full stadium will be done. But I like your idea about just all club, and then the summer, because we're already mentally prepared and culturally prepared for the fact that really that is the time when international competition happens. If you need to have friendlies and obviously qualifying matches for major tournaments, then fine. But you need to lessen that burden because it's just insane. And as a player, as a human being who physically has to deal with this, it's a lot.
Yeah, and when it comes down to it, I just think these international breaks are kind of depressing.
Yeah.
I mean, like, you get so excited about the club game and here's what's going on. Like, with the NFL or the NBA, to ever take like a 2-week break in the middle of the season, like in 3 straight months, it's crazy.
Insane. Upon reported news that Jose Mourinho was high on Lyon's radar for the managerial job, the French club's president Jean-Michel Aulas announced this week that Mourinho had in fact rejected the offer. In a press conference, as quoted by French Football News, Aulas said of his conversation with Mourinho, "We had some fairly flattering exchanges over text messaging. It was nice for everyone, but he did not accept our proposal to meet because he has already chosen another club." So now, we're all wondering, well, at least I am, who is this mystery club? Mourinho has been out of management since his exit by Man United last December, and since then he's done some punditry work. And in the past he said, and I quote, "I have to be patient and wait for the right opportunity, and the right opportunity is one that is at the same size and the same level that I am as a manager," end quote. So now, I'm trying to guess, who is this club for Mourinho? Tottenham? A return to United? Bayern Munich? Mourinho has also apparently been learning German. Make that what you will. Where he goes is one question, but I'm sorry. This is what I think. Whatever your opinion of Jose Mourinho, whether you like him or hate him, you can't deny the fact that his antics, no matter how big or how much you like them, whatever league he's coaching in, he makes it more interesting. I just think from a marketing perspective, from a problem of a situation of soccer in itself, I want Mourinho as a coach because I want to see the drama. You know me, I'm Latino. We live for the drama. So, Mourinho, where are you going next?
We all know it's Real Salt Lake, right? Right?
That would be amazing.
I mean, a couple of things I would say here is that Lyon didn't get even beyond a text message. Like, I texted with Jose Mourinho.
Right.
That's ridiculous. It's all, like, why are you doing this? And, like, he almost sounds like he's upset in a way. It's like, oh, by the way, I'm going to give out this news about Jose Mourinho.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the same guy, Jean-Michel Aulas, who is big into the women's game. He's done a lot for the women's game at Lyon, obviously, but got accused actually by U.S. Soccer of tampering when he tried to sign Alex Morgan a couple of years ago. And, like, he's a nut. But, look, Jose Mourinho looks like he's going to coach again. The German thing's interesting. I couldn't see him coaching anywhere but Bayern Munich in Germany. And I don't think this is a situation where I don't think Kovac is about to be fired. And who knows? Maybe he doesn't even know what his next destination is. Otherwise, he might be there.
He might. I mean, like you said, Jean-Michel Aulas has said some pretty ridiculous things in the past, and tampering, of course. I just want Mourinho back as a manager. I liked what I saw as a pundit. I have said in the past that, yes, that's where he belongs. But the league, I don't care if you like him or hate him. He just makes it better. I mean, Tottenham? I don't know. But more Mourinho, please, every day.
And that is it for this week's episode of Planet Football, episode 90. Thanks for joining us, and catch us next week and every week after that on Thursdays on YouTube or SI.com.